And then in 1999, the Welsh Assembly opened and has since renamed the Senedd. And for our listeners who might not be aware, what is the purpose of the Senedd and what are the devolved powers given to the Welsh government? I say given, that's a telling sign in itself. But yeah, what are the powers?
So obviously there's a lot to cover there. So I think I'll stick to headlines. So the Senedd, what is now the Senedd, is an evolution of what was the Assembly. And the Assembly really didn't have a great deal of power. We need to understand this. There was an awful lot that it could not do. The Senedd can do a little bit more. Obviously, there are devolved areas, the highlights of which are probably health and education, culture and a few other things, But the truth is that it's a very patchy devolution settlement. And I know we're going to talk about the Constitutional Commission later, so I won't go into too much of that now because we will cover that. But that patchiness of devolution, in stark contrast to the Scottish settlement, which started off at a much higher level with much more devolution of power and has since gained even further devolution of other powers because so many things are out of its purview and out of its control. And an awful lot of things don't work for that very reason, because you have a very disjointed way of implementing change. So it's like having a jigsaw where the pieces don't match. You're never going to be able to finish that puzzle or make that puzzle even look half decent because you haven't got all the right pieces to put into it. And to just put that in perspective in terms of those devolved, a couple of facts that are going to put this in perspective for you. So the Welsh Senedd gets a budget of around 25 billion a year. More than half of that, currently 56% of that, is spent on health. So, of all the money that comes into Wales, what you're really talking about is you've got a Senedd which is responsible for health plus a few other things. I mean, there are other issues around health. That proportion has risen an awful lot. It used to be less than 40% and now it's over 50%. So there's that further challenge. But it's a restrictive and clumsy and inadequate bodge job of devolution, really. I mean that's the truth. It's an inadequate settlement. And when you get people criticising the devolutionary settlement because it doesn't work and criticising the Welsh government because they're inadequate and they don't do enough, some of those criticisms are fair. And, the Labour government has been effectively in charge in Wales for 25 years. It's not always been as full of talent as it might have been. It's not always had the clarity of purpose that it might have had. It certainly hasn't always had the bravery to stand up to Westminster and demand more in ways that it should. I think that's evident today. But at the same time, many of the things that have tied the hands of Welsh government and of the Senedd are structural and systemic. So it isn't within its capacity to do those things. So that's where we are with devolution. It's one of the reasons we want to establish New Wales, is to talk about these things in greater depth and talk about them in ways that a wider swathe of the public can understand and appreciate and engage with. I don't think this is definitely a failing of Welsh government and of the Senedd across the entire 26 years now. They have never, ever truly put their minds to communicating to the Welsh public what they do, how they do it, and what they can and can't do well. And that lack of education is really showing 26 years on.
What do you think devolution's brought to Wales that is positive?
So one of the things I think it's brought is, it's quite ephemeral really, but it's brought a sense of identity, and it has fed into that slow growth in confidence. So my eldest son is 25. He's the same age as the Welsh government. And it would never, the things that might have been divisions between myself as a 25-year-old and as 25-year-olds from the valleys or from North Wales or from Deeside within Wales just don't exist for his generation. That sense of unity in a Welsh context for children born in Wales and brought up in Wales during the period of the Assembly and then the Senedd, it is very different. They have a very different understanding and appreciation of Wales and Wales's place in the world. And it allows them to be more confident about Wales outside of Wales. And it's a really interesting and striking thing that so many of Josh's generation and younger have told me, that they don't really understand and appreciate Wales until the day that they leave and come back. And as soon as they leave and face, the kind of prejudice that you get and the kind of mockery that you often perceive, particularly in England across the border, but also when you go abroad and people treat you differently when they understand you're from Wales and not from England, they suddenly come to realise how deeply a part of them it is and how much pride they can have in where they're from and how much it is part of their identity and how that identity unites them in what has become a very global world with instantaneous communication from every corner of the globe. It makes them special, and being Welsh makes them special. And that's much more understood and appreciated. And it doesn't matter how much you might disagree with someone else from Wales, being Welsh as they are, you're special together, even if you hate each other. And that is it. And like I say, it's ephemeral, but it is a qualitative difference in the experience of Joshua's generation relative to mine. Terrible oversimplification, but essentially we're 10 years behind Scotland. And if you look at the demographic data and polling in Scotland on things like identity and these sorts of things, which, as you know, Tom, I do an awful lot of. I'm a bit of a data nerd. You can track that we're about 10 years behind. And when we come to talk about politics, that's going to be really interesting because we're coming to a point where Plaid Cymru might do what the SNP did around 10 years ago. Are we going to keep shadowing that 10-year delay in that way? And are the Labour Party in Wales going to shadow the 10-year delay for the Labour in Scotland? Labour in Scotland did exactly the wrong thing after the SNP stuffed them and destroyed themselves. Are Labour in Wales going to do that? Are they going to double down on being Keir Starmer's Labour, or will they do something else? And will it tear them apart? Because definitely a lot of tension within the Welsh Labour Party and the Welsh Labour infrastructure right now.